Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and today's podcast is going to be devoted to a post-Scream slasher movie released in 1998, and that is Urban Legend. Now, recently I've been focusing on some of the slasher movies from the Golden Age, the likes of The Burning, The Funhouse, The House on Sorority Row, which I think is a slasher movie that is very often overlooked. But I thought I'd actually concentrate on something a little more modern. Something that actually came out nearly 2 years after Scream. And that is, as I said, Urban Legend, released in 98. Now, when Scream was released, obviously, I think we pretty much all know that Scream basically revived the slasher genre in the 90s. I think the slasher genre was pretty much dead at that point. It was kind of on its last legs. And Scream basically revived the corpse of the slasher subgenre, if you will. It was a big commercial success. It actually became the highest grossing slasher movie of all time upon release. So, much like Halloween when that was released in 1978, there were many films that followed in its footsteps, the likes of Friday the 13th, My Bloody Valentine, The Burning, Terror Train, the list goes on and on. With Scream, it also had its followers. We had I Know What You Did Last Summer, we had Urban Legend, of course I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, Cherry Falls, Valentine, and there's many more. So Urban Legend, I actually think this is kind of a fun slasher flick for what it is. I know this is a film that didn't go down well with critics and that. It was criticised quite heavily for basically being a Scream ripoff, just trying to be a Scream imitator. At the end of the day, a movie like this isn't trying to reinvent the horror wheel, if you will. But I think Urban Legend, it has a great cast for one. You have the likes of Alicia Witt, Rebecca Gayheart, Jared Leto, Michael Rosenbaum, Tara Reid. It really does have a good cast. Joshua Jackson, of course, is in there. With Urban, it was actually directed by Jamie Blanks, an Australian director. This was actually his film debut. He actually did go on to direct 2001's Valentine as well. And of course, we actually get a couple of horror icons in this movie. We get Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself, playing Professor Wexler, and certainly I think one of the top suspects for being the killer in this film as well. Of course, we also get Chucky himself, Brad Dourif, as a gas station attendant in the opening to this film, and Danielle Harris from Halloween 4 and 5. And of course, she actually was in the 2007 Rob Zombie directed Halloween, along with its follow-up a couple of years later. Less said about them films, the better at the moment, though. So I think Urban Legend had a pretty good cast going for it. I don't actually think it's a bad slasher movie. I think that the whole kind of idea of the killer actually copying urban legends, etc., I thought it was kind of a nice, neat little idea, actually, that I suppose, in a way, tried to inject a sense of originality into the film. This isn't just a killer running about killing people. There's certain specifics to each murder that they have to follow. But at the same time, when you really dissect it, it's so highly implausible. There's just so many contrivances. There's just so many... It's just massively implausible. Now, I really do like the opening to this film. I think this actually has a great opening. And I'm going to say, I think this has one of the best openings to any slasher movie. And it's obviously based on the classic urban legend of a woman being chased in a car, the person's flashing headlights, and she's scared for her life. But it turns out he's actually trying to warn her, and that there's someone actually in the back seat attempting to kill her. It's a classic urban legend, and I think the opening to this film is executed very well. As I said, though, you have to kind of... With all of these movies, you have to kind of suspend belief I mean, how the hell would the killer know that she was going to be low on gas? How did they know that the gas station attendant was going to have a stutter? It's ridiculous. It's so goddamn, like, practically impossible almost, I'd say. But it's well done. I thought the opening to this film is executed well. I can never hear Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart without envisioning the opening to this movie. And obviously Michelle Mancini, the first victim in the movie. Mancini may very well actually be a nod to Don Mancini, obviously producer, writer of Child's Play. She's actually beheaded. But yeah, really good opening that I think does a good job of actually setting up the tone of this film. But as I said, with all of the murders to follow included, you have to kind of suspend belief because it just wouldn't happen. There's too many pieces that have to come together perfectly for each of these murders to work. Danielle Harris, who's a goth chick in this film, doesn't really have that much in the way of screen time. But yeah, she, again, another classic urban legend in which she's killed. Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights? Where her roommate, the final girl of the film, Alicia Witt, walks in, and she's walked in on her numerous times, having sex. So she walks in, she's hearing all the noises, she assumes she's having sex, but of course we know that she's being killed while she lays in a bed just a few feet away. And obviously it's made to look like a suicide. Again, a classic urban legend. But again, there's just so many kind of like factors that come into play that would have to perfectly align in order to make this murder happen. But it's a slasher movie. They're very often nonsensical anyway. Joshua Jackson is kind of the Joker, the prankster of the film. Of course, he was also a very small role in Scream 2 as one of the film students. I believe that Sarah Michelle Gellar actually accepted the role of Sasha, which actually went to Tara Reid. Sarah Michelle Gellar was going to be in this film, but there were schedule conflicts with filming for Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And just think, that would have been 3 slasher movies that Sarah Michelle was in. Scream 2, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Urban Legend. Now, quickly to get on here to talk about the killer. The killer wears like a Parker jacket in this film, and you'd think to yourself, like, it's kind of a red herring that's thrown out left, right and centre in this movie. It seems everyone on campus in this film has that same jacket, which again is just almost impossible to believe. But from what I understand, the film was originally planned to be set in the middle of winter, when presumably a lot of people would have these kind of jackets, but the weather was too warm. It was decided to drop the whole winter aspect of the storyline. But they kept the killer's costume, so they just kind of kept the costume for it. But yeah, as I said, the Wexler's got one. The creepy janitor, again, another big suspect in the film, has one. Hell, there's even a woman walking into the swimming pool wearing it. So yeah, but yeah, I think this film does a pretty good job with some of the execution of its murders. Another classic urban legend, of course, is Joshua Jackson being hung. She's hearing the scrapings on the top of the car, and of course we know it's her hanged boyfriend and that. Spoiler alert, I mean, I find it impossible to believe that Rebecca Gayhart's character, I believe her surname is actually Bates in this film as well, which could certainly be a nod to Norman Bates from the classic Psycho. I find it impossible to believe that she could have committed all of these murders. I mean, she looks like she weighs about 120 pounds, but again, you've just got to suspend belief. But yeah, the best friend is the killer. And again, like most slasher films, it follows that format of, it's essentially a revenge tale. She's doing it to get revenge on Alicia Witt, who she blames for the death of her boyfriend. Again, it was kind of an initiation, if you will, a little prank gone wrong, and yeah, she's out to get revenge. Clearly you can tell. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to notice this, but you can tell that she's not playing the killer. The killer is clearly stockier than what she is in this film. Loretta Devine's in there, who's very much kind of there for comedy relief, if you will. She's actually a Pam Grier fan. She actually watches Foxy Brown at one point during the movie. And she's kind of comedy relief. Professor Weck, always great to see Robert Englund, who again I think is a big suspect in this movie. Obviously he gets killed as well. Jared Leto, who doesn't look a day over 12. The guy just doesn't seem to age. And it's ironic really, because Jared Leto actually says to Michael Rosenbaum's character in one scene in the film, "Aren't you a little too old to be a student?" Whereas Jared Leto is actually 1 year older than Michael Rosenbaum. I know he doesn't look it, but in reality he's actually a year older than him. There's a pretty good chase sequence, again leading to one of the deaths of Sasha's character being chased through the building where she works at, and everyone can hear her screaming. She's wearing a headset, obviously she never takes it off. Keeps the headset on, and obviously she gets hacked to death with an axe. And again, kind of another urban legend, somebody being killed live on air. The movie certainly takes some liberties with some of the deaths and that. I like the fact that the film actually touches upon the classic kind of When a Stranger Calls urban legend of, the babysitter in the house. Obviously that gets mentioned, talked about by Professor Wexler. And obviously the prankster, Joshua Jackson. There's kind of a little nod to the TV show that essentially made him famous in the first place, Dawson's Creek, when he's trying to get it on with Alicia Witt's character, and he's coming out with a sob story. He lost his girlfriend, she was dying, and he gets a punch for his troubles and that. But when he starts the engine and that, it plays the theme from Dawson's Creek. Now, in urban legend, I quite like the setting. I quite like the whole kind of university setting for the film. And from what I understand as well, the Latin motto of the university, which is actually featured on the emblem in some scenes, actually translates as "the best friend did it." So for anyone out there that can read Latin, which I know there's probably not a huge amount of people that can, it's basically telling you, in a way, it's actually kind of telling you who the killer is in a very kind of wry way. But I don't speak Latin, so that completely passed me by. But I do think this film has some pretty good set pieces. In all honesty, I think it has a perfectly fine final girl in Alicia Witt. She's no Laurie Strode. She's no Sidney Prescott or anything like that. She's by no means nowhere near as memorable as these girls, as these characters. You've got the creepy janitor in there who I've seen in countless TV shows and films. He's just somebody I'm not actually clued up as to what his name is, but he's definitely a suspect. Again, leading to his death, how the hell did the killer get there? Have they got the Michael Myers art of teleportation, or what? The killer somehow gets ahead of Alicia Witt, despite the fact we know it's Rebecca Gayheart, obviously, towards the end of the film, and she tripped down. How the hell did she get in front, get in costume? Where was she keeping the costume? Where was the car? Just none of it makes any sense whatsoever. But you have to put all of this aside. And I actually think Urban Legend is no worse than some of the slasher flicks that we got churned out during the golden age, okay? It's no Scream. In a way, it's a slasher movie. Scream played on the conventions that we've all become accustomed to. Scream was clever. It had a really clever script. So, in a way, films like Urban Legend and I Know What We Did Last Summer are very much taking a step back. Scream was taking a step forward. These are taking a step back. But if you are a fan of them kind of golden age slasher films, you like them old kind of slasher movies and stuff, the films actually kind of follow that kind of set formula, then I think Urban Legend is a slasher film that's quite good. I don't think it's bad at all. movies like this don't generally get well praised by critics anyway. I mean, some do. Halloween is obviously one that very much did. Halloween is considered a classic in that. But for the most part, among the general mainstream, most slasher films generally aren't well received. And I actually think Urban Legend is... I'm actually going to say this. Now, I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. I prefer this to I Know What We Did Last Summer. I do like I Know What We Did Last Summer. I do like it. It is very much a slasher movie that's in the mould of slasher films from the Golden Age. But I just like how Urban Legend was kind of unique in the sense of... I'm a big fan of urban legends, okay? I used to have an urban legend encyclopedia as a kid. I've always been interested in reading these stories that have very much kind of become ingrained into popular culture. The kind of stories that you've heard from a friend, it happened to a sister's brother, friend of a friend, etc. Alligators living in the sewers. Again, that's one of the most well-known urban legends out there. Obviously, we had 1980s Alligator, which was very much a depiction of that urban legend. But I actually think Urban Legend is just kind of a fun slasher flick. And obviously it did have a follow-up released in 2000, which certainly isn't as good. But again, for slasher completionists out there, for people that do love slasher movies, I would certainly say it's worth a watch. I think it has some kills that actually prove to be pretty memorable. And at the end of the day, that's what slasher movies are there for. Right? The kills. Look at the Friday the 13th films. They were never there for, great scripts and great characters and all that. You were watching it to see these characters be killed off one by one. That's essentially what these characters are there for. But yeah, with Urban Legend, like I said, I think it has a great opening. I do think, there's one scene in particular that I hate for the fact of, I'm completely and utterly against animal cruelty. And obviously there's a dog that gets microwaved in this film, which again plays on the whole, the wet dog in the microwave. I believe there's another urban legend actually very similar to it, that's basically about a baby being put in the microwave, I believe it is, or the oven, should I say. Michael Rosenbaum's character, his name is actually escaping me at the moment, actually gets a telephone call. Very kind of Scream-esque, in fact. Telephone call coming from inside the house. He thinks that's the urban legend that's being played out here, and it's actually the dog in the microwave. Hate that scene because I don't like seeing animals hurt on screen and that, but... And then, of course, he gets bleached, shoved down his throat. Now, I'm not actually sure if that's an urban legend or not. If it is, it's certainly one that I've never actually read about at all. But, overall, the kidney heist, the climax of the film, obviously with Rebecca Gayhart's character, who somehow survives the movie. She's like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees all kind of wrapped into one, obviously, and I think it's actually implied, in fact, I believe it's in the second movie, that she actually got away with all the murders. She was able to kill off everyone and actually get away with it as well, because we do actually see her in the final scene of Urban Legend's final cut. Pushing the killer. I quite like the little touch, actually. She's pushing about Hart Bochner's killer from the second movie, and it actually plays the theme from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which I love. It's like the granddaddy of anthology film series. One of my all-time favourite anthology shows. So I think Urban Legend is a perfectly fine slasher film. It's silly, it's completely implausible, but, films like these aren't really there to be taken too seriously anyway. I think that it's certainly a film that throws a few suspects into the mix, I'd say, as well. With the likes of Jared Leto, certainly a suspect in this movie. I just think it has a pretty good cast to it. I think this has, with the slew of teen slasher films that were coming out within this time, these movies certainly gave some of these actors a lot of attention, and they obviously went on to star in, bigger things and better things than that, if you will. But I do believe also I read something that I'm pretty certain that Tara Reid, I think it was Tara Reid and Danielle Harris actually were roommates before. And I believe that Melissa Joan Hart actually turned down the role of Natalie, Alicia Witt's character. So Melissa Joan Hart, Sabrina, the teenage witch herself, would have been the final girl, which I really can't envision, in all honesty. But so that's pretty much all I really want to talk about concerning Urban Legend. I think it's a perfectly fun slasher movie. Yes, it's nonsensical, but I think it has a pretty good cast. I think it has some good set pieces. And it's always good to see Robert Englund and Brad Dourif. I mean, as I said before, with Brad Dourif, I love the whole kind of setup to this film, Brad Dourif. I mean, just it's completely and utterly implausible, though. How the hell do you know that a guy, with a stutter's running a gas station? How do you know they're going to stop there? So that's pretty much all I really wanted to say today concerning Urban Legend. It is a slasher film that I do enjoy. Do I think it's one of the best slasher films of all time? Hell no. This is nowhere near Scream's level. I do actually personally prefer it to I Know What We Did Last Summer. Not by much. I don't really think there's much in it. So thanks a lot for everyone that listened. And if you've liked what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Talk and Stalk, and I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. Take care.